Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? Good afternoon. Welcome back. We are about to head into House Bill 454. This is the House returning on Friday, April 11th. Members, the last item on our agenda today is House Bill 454, which is an act relating to transforming Vermont's education governance, quality, and finance systems. Prior to third reading, we have several amendments on the calendar to consider. The first is from the member from Bennington, Representative Greer, who offers an amendment that begins on page 1507 on today's calendar. Member from Bennington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the amendment that I am presenting today is two parts. The first part, let me get my notes here, is making the argument around as we consolidate districts and seek to create the scales of economy among our districts, we're hoping to preserve our supervisor union structures that encompass existing tuition structures. It was to our concern that language in the bill did not necessarily address small and medium-sized independent schools to what I would have liked, and I think many other members may have liked. Going in to the second part, and this is the more lengthy one, and I'll keep this as brief as possible, is around tuitioning. Let me get my, there we go.
Member from Brattleboro, what is your point of order?
No.
Thank you. Member,
just closer.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yes, so the second part of the amendment is in three sections: subsection A, subsection B1, and subsection B2. Just to talk about subsection A, this one's pointing to the fact that we have a very unique tuitioning structure, and there's longstanding history between different governance structures, and that we hope that the subcommittee will take under consideration that having two very different operating entities merging together would pose a significant challenge to the continuing operations of those districts. Subsection B1 speaks to the fact that towns and non-operating districts, for example, will speak personally in North Bennington, approves on town meeting day our budget, approves our tuitioning system, and the other aspects that take place in our district. And then lastly, subsection B2, which is really at the heart of this and is most pressing to us and our concerns, is that we do our best to provide a truly unique learning environment, and we want to be able to preserve that through the language in the second part of the amendment. I will yield.
Now, for the Committee on Education, member from Cornwall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we certainly thank the member from Bennington for coming in and talking with us about his area. And we took some time and discussed this. And really, we were a little bit more concerned with the first instance of amendment. And in our committee, we felt that the concerns, this is within the work of the School Boundary Subcommittee of the Commission on the Future of Public Education and their considerations that are taken into account. And we felt that the concerns of the member were really well addressed in the language that already exists in H454, which says that to the extent practical, to consider historic attendance patterns in geographic areas that do not operate public schools and at all grade levels from kindergarten through grade 12. This really speaks to areas that, in fact, do not operate schools and are therefore have to tuition their kids. So based on that, the committee voted 6-3-2 to find this an unfriendly amendment, and we urge the body to vote no.
And now for the Committee on Ways and Means, member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, we have one education fund here in Vermont that every homestead and non-homestead taxpayer pays into. It is one of the greatest pieces of equity in our state tax system. And that education fund then pays out to every district in the state. As we are making these significant once-in-a-generation changes to our school system, to our tax system, it is important that we are all in on this. If we allow a carve out for a single district or a single area in order for that district to be better off from their perspective, we are not making good on the true promise of both our statewide education fund and the meaningful reform that we have all agreed to be all in on. So with that, Madam Speaker, we voted against the Greer amendment, and we took favorable votes, Madam Speaker, today on all of our amendments, which is going to cause confusion throughout the afternoon. It's not the morning anymore. And so we found it favorable on a vote of 1 to 10, which means that we rejected the amendment. I will explain it that complicatedly each time. Thank you.
Member from Bennington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and my apologies for not having my notes prepared just a moment ago. I was preparing more for this. My apologies. Madam Speaker, I rise today because of the growing concern in my community around the interest of the North Bennington Graded School District and our tuitioning structure. This amendment seeks for the study committee to preserve our supervisory union structures and in the case of many districts like ours, the tuitioning program for independent schools governed by our people. Madam Speaker, I had many concerns brought to me by villagers and community members that did not see themselves reflected in this bill, and in fact, some could say excluded. I felt that it was appropriate, despite the last-minute timeliness of this language, to bring this fully into the public domain about what I was hearing from people in my district. And I want to give my heartfelt thanks to the members of the Ways and Means Committee and additionally to the Education Committee for giving me an opportunity to present this language, and especially to the Education Committee for not having me present on my own screen this morning. Besides that, Madam Speaker, I still have concerns about the potential for unique school districts like ours to be minimized or forgotten, but here's the beauty of this all. We still have time. We have time to adjust and calibrate accordingly so that districts like ours do not get left behind while ensuring that all of our communities thrive. I'd be remiss, however, if I did not mention how we are so proud of our school. It is not seen as a cost or a burden on the residents of our village to operate our school. It is an investment toward our community in protecting our identity, as it has been integral for over 150 years to the village. The majority of the families choose to send their children to the village school because we offer the array of support services and special education to our students. And without it, our village would cease to be the economic center and community it is today. And with that, Madam Speaker, it is with great difficulty that I come to this conclusion, which is not an admission of defeat, but an acceptance of the moment that we find ourselves at, that we have tried and we were very respectfully heard. If I may quote Thomas Sowell very briefly, Madam Speaker.
You may.
Any policy is a success by sufficiently low standards and a failure by sufficiently high standards. I do not believe this policy is either a success nor a failure, but a step in a direction that will present us options as we work together. As it relates to this amendment in the bill, I think we should caution ourselves to be satisfied by everything and to be unsatisfied with nothing. And again, I want to thank the committees on Ways and Means and Education for taking valuable time out of their schedule to hear my concerns. Madam Speaker, I ask leave of the House to withdraw my amendment.
Absent objection, leave is granted. Next, the member from St. Albans Town, Representative Toof, and the member from Essex Junction, Representative Hotton, offer an amendment that begins on page 1508 of today's calendar. Member from St. Albans Town.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have already presented this 3 times today. Hopefully, the 4th time goes just as well as the first 3. My amendment to the bill can be found on page 1508, like the speaker said. We worked really hard in House Education this year. We've had a lot of discussions on what the future of education is going to look like, how we're going to fund it. And in the end, I am I'm hopeful that we will come up with a solution. And I'm very grateful that they listened to this amendment today and put it into consideration for us to talk about on the floor. There are 5 instances of amendment, if you want to follow along on 1508. The first instance of amendment, we'll be adding 4 members to our district mapping subcommittee. Those 4 members will be legislative members that will be non-voting members, 2 current members of the House of Representatives, not all from the same political party or same school district, shall be appointed by the Speaker of the House, and 2 current members of the Senate, not from the same political party or same school district, who shall be appointed by the Committee on Committees. So that just adds the number. So that's to our second instance of amendment, which will change the committee from 5 members to 9 members. In my third instance of amendment, and this is one that's really big for me because when we are we're building maps and we're looking at districts, it's a really emotional process. It's a really big process, but I don't think it can be done unless you have you're looking at what's going to happen with the governance within those boundaries. And this right here, Madam Speaker, will be this section starting on page 1509, section 2A, the school district voting ward task force report maps. We're going to create a school district voting ward task force, and the membership is as follows. You'll have the Secretary of State or designee, who shall be the chair, 3 members who shall be appointed by the Vermont Municipal Clerk Treasurers Association, 2 members appointed by the Vermont School Boards Association, and the Director of Vermont Center for Geographic Information or designee. The powers and duties, basically what this will do, on or before October 15th, the task force will work in consultation with the district boundary subcommittee, and they will be looking at optimal number of school board members per school board to maximize public representation. Also looking at the boundary school district voting wards within each school district, with alternative options if necessary, included detailed maps clearly and unambiguously delineating ward boundaries that respect current municipal boundary lines. So that's the third instance. The fourth instance of amendment will be amending in section 61, it'll be adding section 61B, which is your property tax classification implementation report. It's going to look at these 3 new classifications that I know I have some concerns. I've heard some colleagues on other committees talk about their concerns with this new classification and what it means for businesses and what it means for our non-homestead rates. It's going to look at this a little more in depth with a report coming back from the the Commissioner of the Taxes and the Department of Taxes, looking at this and filing a report with the Committee on Ways and Means and Senate Committee on Finance on or before December 15th, 2026. And in the 5th instance of amendment is all of our effective dates. And you can go through there. There's quite a few that there's 15 instances in that. So I appreciate the 3 committees for hearing my testimony today, and I hope everyone can support this amendment. Thank you.
Member from Cornwall.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we appreciate always seeing our own member in our committee, the House Education Committee. We appreciate the spirit of compromise in this proposal, and the committee saw the wisdom of adding legislative members to the District Boundary Subcommittee, which I think will create a stronger tie between the work of that group and the work that takes place here. We also appreciate the member creating the additional task force. We know that just drawing legislative districts can be a 6 to 9 month process, so any additional help and head start is definitely a positive. Our committee voted 10-0-1 in favor of the amendment, and we urge the body's support. Thank you.
Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, I would repeat the remarks that the member from Cornwall just shared, and also add that while the Ways and Means Committee has a lot of trust with the tax department, that they will always bring us any challenges as they're implementing our work. It's always wonderful to have a belt and suspenders on that, as we say, and receive a report back on implementation progress and any challenges. And so we are happy to support this amendment on a vote of 11-0. Thank you.
Member from Putney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We also heard the presentation here, and your House Appropriations Committee agreed with that on a vote of 10-0-1.
Now the question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from St. Albans Town and the member from Essex Junction? Are you ready for the question? Member from Dover.
Yes, Madam Speaker, may I interrogate the presenter of the amendment?
The member from St. Albans Town is interrogated.
Madam Speaker, I just want to make sure, this is a big bill, lots of policy pieces moving pretty quickly. I want to make sure I understand the fifth instance of amendment and the changes to the dates and how they might impact school districts' planning. So if we could have the member just kind of walk us through those. My interest in this is making sure that I'm able to adequately explain to my school boards this change in effective date.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know that the intent here is to have, we heard from the Secretary of State testimony during our, writing of the underlying bill. And they had mentioned that in order for us to have district maps ready to go and with wards and everything ready to go, they wanted to make sure that we knew they would need all this information before May 15th of 2026. And so my intent here and with this will be making sure that those dates fall within that timeline. If those two task force subcommittees, whatever we want to call them, if they are ready for that time. So that's why we have those, that date moved up.
Okay. And Madam Speaker, I just want to make sure I'm clear. What does this do in terms of dates for the mapping exercise? So when the committee is coming together, when they're doing their work, when we will be looking at it?
So,
And it's the fifth instance of the amendment that I'm talking about.
we will still have this ready for us. We have to make the final decision when we come back in January. The body, the way the underlying bill is written, it doesn't change the fact that we will get those recommendations from the task or the subcommittee. So we will still have to make that decision ourselves as a body in the House and Senate.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker. I may have more to say later, but on this amendment, no, I think I'll be done.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from St. Albans Town and the member from Essex Junction? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill. Now the member from Berrytown, Representative Galetti, offers an amendment that the first assistant clerk emailed to members at 9 a.m. this morning. This amendment is also posted on the House Overview webpage, and paper copies are available on the main table. Member from Berrytown.
Madam Speaker, this amendment would revert H 454 back to the bill as introduced, reflecting the governor's original education transformation proposal. House Republicans stand united in the belief that we need real education transformation now. We should not be punting the hard decisions we were elected to make to a subcommittee of last year's failed study commission. We should not be moving forward with a new funding formula that could actually cost Vermonters more money when the voters were clear they need relief. The original bill would have delivered education transformation faster and saved taxpayers more money than the bill before us now. It would have allowed more equity and greater access to opportunities for students from district to district. It would have allowed us to pay teachers more, expand childcare, and many other things. This is the kind of real education transformation that House Republicans want to see happen this session, not kicking the can down the road. I will be asking to withdraw this amendment. However, because it's clear the majority party isn't ready to move forward with the resolve our constituents deserve, it is my hope that when the other body returns an education transformation bill to us, it is more reflective of the original 454 than what they will receive from us. And with that, Madam Speaker, I would like to ask leave of the House to withdraw this amendment.
Absent objection, leave is granted. Now, the member from Waterbury, Representative Wood, and others offer an amendment that the first assistant clerk emailed to members at 10:05 this morning. This amendment is also posted on the House Overview webpage, and paper copies are available at the main table. Member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This morning I had the opportunity to present this amendment to the House Ways and Means Committee, and I thank them for their careful attention to the language that we were looking to change. We, in the House Human Services Committee, had some concern at the unintended further stigmatizing children with disabilities by referring to them as high cost in some instances. And so we merely were also replicating the procedure that the committee had used for English language learners by assigning or suggesting that an assignment of a category like category A, B, and C be used, and therefore not further providing any disadvantage to children with disabilities and how they are referred to in state statute. So that was our portion of the bill, and in my committee, that was voted on a straw poll in favor of 9-0.
Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, we very much appreciate the work of the members of the Human Services Committee to bring some humanity to folks who might spend a little too much time with numbers sometimes. And just really appreciate the very careful work they did to stay with our original intent and to be consistent with the academic studies and modeling that we've been working with as they brought much more respectful language to this bill. We also took this opportunity while that piece of the bill was open to add an update to some of the weighting, the way the special education weights were described in the language, to add a category that we had previously left out in conversations with the Agency of Education. That spending is already happening around the state, and we want to make sure that all special education costs we're including as we do our work going forward. So I spent a little bit of time yesterday talking about special education costs. Some of it we're studying through studying extraordinary special education, and then the weights is taking the place of both categorical grants and some other work. And so we appreciate that opportunity to update those numbers and language in keeping with an updated memo that folks can find on the Joint Fiscal Office website. Our vote on this amendment was 10-0-1, and we ask for the body's support.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Waterbury and others? Are you ready for the question? Member from Dover.
Yes, Madam Speaker, may I interrogate the Chair of Ways and Means?
The member from, I'm sorry, I had a hard time hearing you, member. Can you repeat that?
May I interrogate the Chair of Ways and Means?
The member from Brattleboro is interrogated.
Madam Speaker, just a question on the new weight. Can you tell me how that was derived?
Yes, Madam Speaker. It was an update to the data that was included in the previous modeling of the special education weights, and the updated modeling and memo can be found in a link in the Joint Fiscal Office website that I can open and read to you or show to you. But it was derived exactly the same way as all of the other weights in the bill. It was just an updated number.
Okay, and that was based on all of the weights? It was based on, what was it based on?
I don't quite understand your question, Madam Speaker.
So in the past, our weights have been not empirically derived. I know we've done a lot of work. I know that work has been continued here with, and we have a memo. And so I'm just trying to make sure that this is something that is based on something other than solving a problem.
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. I appreciate that we're revisiting an old conversation that we've spent time on, and I am now refreshed. Thank you. So one of the really important things about how we do this work is mathematically all the weights are interconnected to each other, so we can't just change one and have all the others stay the same. Have all the other numbers stay the same necessarily. So this entire section of the model was rerun, and you can find the details of that in the memo that I'm happy to send to you.
That's great. Thank you, Madam Speaker. That answers my question.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Waterbury and others? Are you ready for the question? Member from Franklin.
Madam Speaker, may I interrogate the member from Ways and Means, the chair of Ways and Means?
The member from Brattleboro is interrogated.
Madam Chair, did you get an estimate of how much additional cost the changing of this weight would cause?
Madam Speaker, one of the interesting pieces about special education costs is we essentially we spend that money essentially regardless of how we structure things on the state level. So that money is already being spent.
Madam Speaker, if that's the way we do business, then how do we ever come up with the efficient and effective means of spending and getting outcomes that we desire?
Madam Speaker, I'm sorry, I'm distracted for 1 second because my computer is about to die and the member from Manchester is helping me with electricity. Scooting. So special education, and I'm not a special education expert, but what I do know is that special education law is tightly controlled by the federal government, and we have both maintenance of effort and maintenance of financial support guidelines that we're required to follow through on, as well as any special education services that are delivered to a student is governed by essentially a subcontract between that family and the school for those services. And so any change in special education funding is incredibly complex to move forward. We are very much looking to reduce special education spending while meeting the needs of students, because we are not actually meeting the special education needs of students. There were a number of headlines about that this year. And so we have this comprehensive study work that we're doing with the Agency of Education to make sure that they are doing their part in this work. But in the meantime, we must maintain those clear federal guidelines. And the move to weights is an effort to make sure that we do not have, I'm going to use the mathematical term, perverse incentives in our system to either over-identify or overspend, or frankly, honestly, just move things from one budget line item to another, and are in fact making sure that all of our special education costs are covered within special education line items.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You hear what I'm asking. I'm asking that we have metrics and we have calculations that in fact are heading us towards effective and efficient education in our school systems so that we can properly allocate the monies needed to receive specific outcomes in those students so that we're getting the education that we can afford and that is best for our students. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Waterbury and others? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill. Now the member from Northfield, Representative Donahghue, offers an amendment that the first assistant clerk emailed to members at 10:10 this morning. This amendment is also posted on the House Overview webpage, and paper copies are available at the main table. Member from Northfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I think we all recognize that in a very major transformation like this, and in terms of the rationales for doing it, we're always confronted with the balance between urgency and getting it right. Excuse me, doing it right. And that is often expressed in terms of the intent sections of the bill and how we lay out what we hope to achieve, our aspirational approach to that balance between urgency and doing it right as far as what we hope to achieve and when. I would point out, Madam Speaker, that just a few weeks ago, we passed H91 on emergency housing and homelessness. And we passed a part of intent that said it's the intent of the General Assembly that unsheltered homelessness in Vermont be eliminated. We recognize that as aspirational. We recognize that's not likely to be achieved even within a much longer timeline. But we wanted to keep what our ultimate goal and hopes are in front of us. Madam Speaker, the amendment that was adopted just a few moments ago that establishes a committee to work on the wards, I think directly indicates some of our intentions, or has an intention of its own. And if we look back at that amendment, because this proposal is intended to enhance and it be in support of the amendment that was just passed. If we look back at that amendment, it creates a ward task force that is intended to create voting district wards. In other words, do that heavy lift of actually outlining them. And it then says it's going to come back and make recommendations to the General Assembly to achieve the voting districts. Now, it notes under the powers and duties that that work group, that task force, is also going to be collaborating with, comparing the status of the task force on the subcommittee on boundary proposals so that they work in sync with each other. And that those voting districts that the task force will develop will meet the intentions of equal weighting of votes and meeting the requirements of state and federal law. So the intent is clear that this is getting a big leg up on the timing and sequencing of the work. In fact, the task force is going to start on passage of this bill, but then cease to exist by June 2026. So its work will be completed by then. It will have turned over at the beginning of next year's session its recommendations for the legislature to have that leg up on that very challenging task of determining the boundaries and the wards. Madam Speaker, I think that the amendment we passed clearly indicates the aspiration of moving with a bit more urgency than we would have without the amendment. And I believe that the intent language of the bill itself should align with that same intent of the amendment in support of it, to express our intent to really move forward as urgently, with as much urgency we can, while still maintaining the absolute premise that we want to do it right. Because this is aspirational, it's not deadlines, it's nothing written in stone. Even if we had dates written in stone, they're not really in stone because they can be repealed and changed. But it is here at least an expression of our hopes and intents. So looking at the language itself, which is not obvious necessarily when you see the amendment, because it's a legislative drafting matter where it can't actually show up as underlined or strike through. But if you look, this is the intent section, and under number 2 for the intent, it expresses the, first of all, A, the intention of what would be achieved in the 2026 session. And the first change is number sub 1, is that enact new larger school district boundaries that would be effective, and it changes it from July 1, 2027 to July 1, 26, because that would be premised on whether there might now be an ability, a hoped for ability, to establishing those in 2026 because of the advance work that we just passed in the amendment to get that started and well underway before the General Assembly is back in session. The second change ties directly in with that, and that is under sub 5, small 5. The original language said regarding the creation of voting wards that in 2026 we would begin the process, that session, begin the process to create voting wards. And the new language simply strikes begin the process and say that the intent would be, we may not be able to achieve it, but the intent would be to create those voting wards during next year's session. In B and C, it likewise realigns that same timeline, because if that's achieved, if those boundaries are in place by July 1, 26, that would then allow that first election to take place in March of 2027. So that's the chamber under B, the date. And C, it would allow the full functioning of those new districts by July 2028 instead of 2029. Madam Speaker, when I first looked at this bill, I thought it had tremendous strengths in the planning, in the thoughtfulness, in the effort to do it right, and to really put that thought into it. I thought many of the components, why they may have to be adjusted or revised in the work over the next several years, they struck the exact right pattern forward. The only concern I had is telling our voters that it's 4 years away before there's any real hope or expectation that this would be achieved. Madam Speaker, it may take 4 years, it may take longer, but I think that to stay in line with the efforts to move that decision-making around the boundaries and the wards sooner, that rather than saying, certainly can't be in 2 years, there were people who wanted it in 2 years. As soon as I sat down with Legislative Counsel and worked out what had to be done in the timelines, that was clear to me. But rather than 4 years, I think aspirationally to say it may be possible to achieve it in 3 years. And if it is possible to do that thoughtfully, then we would be recognizing the urgency, and we would be letting our constituents and voters know we do recognize the urgency of making these changes. And as long as we're still able to do it well and do it right, then we should try for it, and that is what we're going to try for. So, Madam Speaker, I actually think it almost defeats the purpose of the earlier, part of the purpose of the earlier amendment in doing this earlier work and making it feasible, potentially feasible to get that work done in 2026 if we don't realign our intent to say, aspirationally, this is what we hope we may be able to achieve. Not changing the dates to align with that raises a question about whether we're really serious about what we expect and hope from that very work that we just approved. So, Madam Speaker, I ask for the body's support to align this intent with where we're trying to go with this urgent process.
Member from Cornwall.
Madam Speaker, we certainly thank the member for continuing the discussion on timeline. I can assure the body that the timeline in H454 is very carefully thought out, including and especially the creation of new voting wards. The creation of new school districts is going to be one of the largest political subdivisions of this state ever drawn. And these new districts are going to be overseen by boards with taxing authority and collectively with control of over $2 billion. How we elect the people who do this work will be vitally important. When we create voting districts to elect members to the legislature, it is a 6 to 8 month process that is very public facing. It starts with the Legislative Reapportionment Board, which holds public hearings, publicly creates wards, and recommends it to the legislature. When the legislature takes the work on, next, the process is repeated, including required public hearings and required inputs from people like boards of civil authority. Intent language is important. It is a signal. The timeline in H454 ensures a proper process with a time built in to do the kind of public-facing work that we insist for the drawing of our own wards. We should signal that that is our intention with these very crucial decisions. Madam Speaker, the House Committee on Education in a straw poll voted 7-4 to find the amendment unfavorable, and we urge the body to vote no.
Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, transformative change takes trust. And for every decision we make in this room, even the smallest of bills, significant work then has to happen in our communities to affirm and to follow through on that work. In this bill, that is true more than ever. And at each step that we have taken, each conversation we have had in committee, more and more details of the work that lies ahead has become clear to us. When we began the work to look at staffing related to consolidation, and I started a conversation about the impact on the pension funds. Next thing I knew, we were having a conversation about the impact on our unemployment insurance trust fund. And when we have conversations about school construction, then we need to talk to the bond bank to understand how much bond debt is already sitting in our communities and our districts and what it looks like to divide that up. And each time that we have had those conversations in committee and then done that work on the side, that is because of folks in the field who are doing this work every day, who point out those details to us. We cannot afford to get this work wrong. For our kids, for our schools, and for our communities, these details truly matter, and we are just uncovering some of those now. And it is an act of trust between us and this body and our whole communities that we are going to do this work at a pace that it deserves. I've also spoken previously about the work that is already in this bill to reduce costs in our education system, by really truly addressing the cost drivers, whether that is the significant changes we need to make to special education in our state, to how we care for our buildings, to the number of students in classrooms. It's very important that we start addressing many of those cost drivers and bring down those costs even before we get to these new districts in the foundation formula, so that the foundation formula can be recalibrated to continue to lower costs. And so for all of those reasons, the trust in our community, the details we still have to learn, and the significant work that's gone on to make sure that the timeline in the bill is correct, your Committee on Ways and Means voted to reject this amendment. And that was a vote for the amendment of 290. And so we ask for you to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Northfield? Are you ready for the question, member from Poultney? The member from Poultney requests that when the vote is taken, it be taken by rolls. The member sustained. The member is sustained. When the vote is taken, it will be taken by roll. Will the House please come to order? The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Northfield? Are you ready for the question? If so, member from Lowell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a clarification, I believe that the vote out of Ways and Means was 8-3-0. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Madam Speaker, I need to look inside my telephone for a minute, excuse me.
Will the House stand at ease for a moment? Will the House please come to order? Member from Brattleboro.
I am so sorry, Madam Speaker. In fact, the representative and I were both incorrect on the vote count, and it was 470.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Northfield? Are you ready for the question? If so, will the clerk please call the roll?
Arsenault of Williston.
2 minutes. Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? Will the House please come to order? I would like to remind members that we are in the middle of a roll call vote. Members and guests are prohibited from using computers, phones, or any type of an electronic device. Please refrain from the passing of notes and conversation during the roll call. When the clerk calls your name, please answer in a loud and clear voice so the clerk can accurately record your votes. The question is, shall the bill be amended as offered by the member from Northfield? Will the clerk please continue to call the roll?
Austin of Colchester. I'm sorry. Bailey of Hyde Park. Bartholomew of Heartland. Bartley of Fairfax. Rebecca of Winooski. Byrong of Regents. Bishop of Colchester. Black of Essex. Bloomley of Burlington. Boslin of Westminster. Bosch of Clarendon. Boonton of Berry City. Boyden of Cambridge. Brady of Williston. Brannigan of Georgia. Brown of Richmond. Burdett of West Rutland. Burke of Brattleboro. Burkhardt of South Burlington. Burrows of West Windsor. Bird of Cabot. Campbell of St. Johnsbury. Canfield of Fairhaven. Karis Duncan of Whitingham. Casey of Montpelier. Casey Hubbardton. Chapin of East Montpelier. Charlton Chester. Christie of Hartford. Chena of Burlington. Coffin of Cavendish. Cole of Hartford. Conlon of Cornwall. Cooper of Pownell. Corcoran of Bennington. Cordes of Bristol. Critchlow of Colchester. Tamar of Venusburg. Dickinson of St. Albans Town. Doverovich of Williamstown. Dodge of Essex. Dolan of Essex Junction. Dolgan of St. Johnsbury. Donahghue of Northfield. Duke of Burlington. Durfee of Shaftesbury. Eastis of Guilford. Emmons of Springfield. Feltus of Linden. Galfetti of Berrytown. Garifano of Essex. Goldman of Rockingham. Goodnow of Brattleboro. Ghostland of Northfield. Granning of Jericho. Greer of Bennington. Gregoire of Fairfield. Hengo of Berkshire. Harpole of Glover. Harrison of Chittenden. Harvey of Castleton. Hedrick of Burlington. Higley of Lowell. Holcomb of Norwich. Hooper of Randolph. Hooper of Burlington. Houghton of Essex Junction. Howard of Rutland City. Holland of Rutland Town. Hunter of Manchester. James of Manchester. Kosenska of Burke. Keyser of Rutland City. Kimball of Woodstock. Klepner of Burlington. Kornheiser of Brattleboro. Krasnow, South Burlington. Labor of Morgan. Lally of Shelburne. Lalone of South Burlington. Lamont of Morristown. LaRush of Franklin. Lipsky of Stowe. Logan of Burlington. Long of Newfane. Luna of St. Albans City. McGuire of Rutland City. Malay of Pittsford. Marcotte of Coventry. Maslin of Thetford. McCann of Montpelier. McCoy of Pulteney. McFawn of Berrytown. McGill of Bridport. Mickless of Milton. Mahaly of Calais. Minier of South Burlington. Morganella Milton. Morgan Emma Milton. Morse of Springfield. Morrissey of Bennington. Mora of Weston. Rowanke of Putney. Nelson of Derby.
Nielsen of Brandon. Niagara of Bennington. North of Ferrisburg. Noyes of Wolcott. Nugent of South Burlington. O'Brien of Tunbridge. Odie Burlington. Oliver of Sheldon. Olson of Starksboro. Page of Newport City. Parsons of Newberry. Pezzo of Colchester. Pincinot of Dorset. Pouch of Heinsberg. Powers of Waterford. Priestley of Bradford. Pritchard of Pollitt. Quimby of Linden. Rachelson of Burlington. Sakowitz of Randolph. Shai of Middlebury. Sheldon Middlebury. Sibylla of Dover. Southworth of Walden. Squirrel of Underhill. Steady of Milton. Stevens of Waterbury. Stone of Burlington. Supernon of Barnard. Sweeney of Shelburne. Taglavia of Corinth. Taylor of Milton. Tomlinson of Winooski. Toof of St. Albans Town. Torrey of Marktown. Walker of Swanton. Waz of Zachary City. Waters Evans of Charlotte. Wells of Brownington. White of Waitsfield. White of Bethel. Winter of Ludlow. Wood of Waterbury. Yakavoni, Morristown. Christie of Hartford. Cole of Hartford. Dickinson of St. Albans Town. McGuire of Rutland City. Morse of Springfield. And Wells of Brownington.
For purpose of explanation, member from Williston.
We are setting in motion hard generational systems change, but we, the legislature, have the easy part here. Systems are made of real people, in this case, most especially our kids, their families, and educators. So when we talk about systems change, we are talking about changing them, and I voted no because I do not believe we need to rush an already ambitious timeline.
Member from Poultney.
Madam Speaker, we just passed the Tou and Hotton amendment to, among other things, move forward dates of commissions in this bill. This amendment aligns the intent language in H454 to mirror the Tou and Hotton amendment. I vote yes to align all sections, as well as intent language of this bill.
Member from Colchester.
Madam Speaker, may I please change my vote?
You may.
Austin of Colchester.
No.
Member from Northfield.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
I think it is unfortunate that we are not willing to tell voters that we do not want to try to achieve this crucial and urgent work more quickly, if at all possible and reasonable.
Members, please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yes, 60. Those voting no, 83. The nays have it, and you have declined to amend the bill. Seeing no further amendments, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
Page 454, an act relating to transforming Vermont's education, governance, quality, and finance systems.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? Member from Tunbridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, may I inquire of the presenter of the bill?
The member from Cornwall is interrogated.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In the last 24 hours, I've been hearing a lot about H454 and not in a good way. For that reason, I feel I'd be remiss not to ask some basic questions about this bill. And I think we tend to forget here that Vermonters, constituents are watching on YouTube or Zooming in. And I feel a lot of the discussion on this bill has never really come up. So bear with me. On school closures, Madam Speaker, I wondered if there was ever an estimate, either in testimony or maybe some sort of trajectory data of how many elementary schools would close if this bill became law.
The answer is no, we did not take testimony on that. I think that predicting that would be very challenging in that, it would require demographic studies to show what our declining enrollment is causing. But also, there is no closure language proposed in this bill. That really will probably come with part two as we begin to create charters for each of these school districts and how those difficult decisions will be handled.
Thank you. On healthcare, healthcare cost, health insurance premiums seem to be runaway, and I wondered how this bill addresses rising cost of healthcare, given that that's such a big part of our school budget.
This bill is strictly about education, and it does not get into the healthcare debate.
On busing and transportation, did the committee see any data on the cost of busing in this transformation?
No, again, this is going to be a multi-year process. We've talked a lot about the timeline. And when we talk about transportation, much of it is going to be in the purview of the new boards, because one of their biggest roles and biggest jobs will be to decide where every student attends school. And that is where calculations on transportation costs will probably play a role.
Madam Speaker, is there data right now on the length of bus rides of, say, your average elementary school student?
To my knowledge, no.
So there was no testimony on whether this bill, if passed, would potentially increase the length of a fourth grader's bus ride?
We had no testimony on if this bill passed what the length of a bus ride would be for a fourth grader.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, on the emotional and social well-being of students, was any testimony or was any data given to the committee on that question of whether schools, small schools or large schools, favor emotional and social well-being for a student?
No data was presented on that matter. We certainly had testimony that spoke to it anecdotally and about sort of opportunities, abilities, or access to services that come with scale.
Thank you. On affordability, was there any data, convincing data, showing that school districts are more cost efficient than, that supervisory districts are more cost efficient than supervisory unions?
No, I think the financial data is really around the foundation formula and the level to which the use of a foundation formula can bend the cost curve going forward. It did not, there was no data about a school district versus a supervisory union. That might be hard to calculate since every supervisory union in and of itself is different from another.
Thank you. Given that the House Committee on Education sees a lot of data on education, I just wondered if there's ever been any data showing if the consolidations of Act 46 actually saved the state or the Ed Fund a lot of money.
I would say that I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to also defer to the chair of Ways and Means, who may have additional data. a lot of the Act 46 information I would call anecdotal, but really what we often find with school districts is as they find savings in one area, they often take those savings and invest it in other parts. So Act 46, for example, may have led to a reduction in the number of staff, but that saved money may have then been invested in crumbling building or another need within that school district. Madam Speaker, may I defer to the member from Ways and Means?
The member from Cornwall yields to the member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, one of the key differences with moving to a foundation formula system for education is because we can more closely stabilize costs and spending. So as costs are realized in one area, they can go towards either lowering tax rates or investing in something else, but we can do it at a state level in a policy-driven way instead of some of what we've seen with previous smaller reform efforts. And I think that a lot of what the representative from Cornwall said about Act 46 possible Act 46 cost savings is what we've seen when we've explored the education fund impacts of that change. I would also add, and I believe I said this during one of the amendments, there are still a lot of costs that we need to understand better before this work is finalized, and a lot of cost drivers we need to reduce. We do have sections in the Ways and Means portion of the bill related to understanding how healthcare costs are driving some of our other spending and making sure we're using the right inflation factor, as well as I know some of our other committees of jurisdiction are looking at that. We have a transportation reimbursement report due next session that will help us understand that better. And all of these costs very explicitly depend on the specific district, and so are going to require the Agency of Education to spend this intervening time diving in deep to make sure that we are continuing this multi-year reform effort in a way that meets the needs of all children in our state.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Lastly, on academic outcomes, I wondered if there was data on small schools, say small rural schools versus larger schools, in say towns where the median income is very similar. So I'm thinking, say, Barnard and Shelburne, for example. Does data show that bigger schools are better in that way? Have better academic outcomes, I should be more accurate.
Madam Speaker, the data is always a challenge. It is especially a challenge with small schools. Academic data, because of school size, is often sort of not shared because of the size, can really reach down to the level of kids' identities. So a lot of that data is suppressed. I know that some school boards will ask to see that data when the governing school boards of small schools in executive session, but in terms of data that can be shared publicly, we do not have any. It doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, it was not shared with us.
So when we hear on the radio about testing scores for Vermont schools, whether it's fourth graders, eighth graders, teenagers, high schoolers, is that data then not accessible to the House Committee on Education?
The question is more about breaking that data down into small schools. Because small schools are small, often the data can be so sort of individual that there could be the potential to identify a student. And for that reason, much of that data is suppressed from the public.
Thank you, member. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
My apologies, member.
On the way up here this morning, on my drive up, I asked myself a question. Why would I vote for this bill? I spoke to a former elementary principal last night who said if we pass this bill, every school in my supervisory union is going to close. 10 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school. Why would I vote for this bill? I am a big fan of local control. I can't see how this bill does anything for local control. The member from Newfane who spoke eloquently about the history of schools in Vermont yesterday. When I think of, say, Tunbridge had, in the 1800s, had 21 one-room schoolhouses, each with local control, very local, even more than the town. And then eventually there was a Tunbridge Central School. And now this bill has taken us to the point where there's almost going to be no local control at all if this passes. We'll have to drive 75 minutes just to a school board meeting. And personally, I'm a huge fan of rural local schools. I went to the Newton School in Stratford, graduating class of 9. I went to Chelsea High School, which doesn't exist anymore, graduating class of 25. And then I went to Harvard. I'm the product of rural Vermont public education. On social and emotional safety, when I look at the Brigham decision, and I can quote it right out of the bill here, it says the most enduring legacy of Brigham is the state's responsibility to ensure substantially equal educational opportunities for all Vermont students. And then I look at if this bill passed, say a fourth grader in Tunbridge with a class size of 9, the school is going to be closed. The student will probably ride a bus for 75 minutes to a school of over 400 with a class size, say, of 25. I don't think that's a great idea of educational opportunity. On affordability, this one-size-fits-all mentality that bigger's better, I disagree with, and even data somewhat shows that. The White River Valley High School in South Royalton, the per pupil spending is about $19,000. And in Randolph, a much bigger school, Randolph High School, the per pupil spending is about $27,000. So I don't know why the data is saying we should get rid of our small schools. I think it's very individual. Some supervisory unions are very frugal and get good outcomes. My constituents hate this bill. And I don't want to be the representative that has to go home and say, today I voted to close every one of our schools. And I don't know why rural Vermont would vote for this bill. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Berry City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. With our vote today, we have the chance to make real change and to make a real difference. We have the rare chance in this chamber to change lives, to protect and support our kids across the state and in Berry City. I rise today to put real faces and true stories behind the numbers that we are discussing and debating here in the House chamber. Foundation formulas, evidence-based models, data-driven decisions, and cost factor analyses are all important considerations for difficult policy choices. But these words tend to remove us, to separate the spreadsheets from the people they are built upon, and to hide our children behind algebraic formulas and algorithms. When I was kicked out at 15, it was my support system at Hudson High School that helped me survive. Through hunger, housing insecurity, mental health crisis, and thinking that there was no way that I'd live to see graduation day, the teacher who kept me going was Mrs. Kathleen McKenzie, whom to this day is saved in my phone as Mama Mac. It was her, alongside too many others to name, that filled in the gap of support that was left by a dysfunctional and difficult home life. Unfortunately, in the time since I graduated high school in 2015, the societal conditions that allowed my situation to occur have only gotten worse. After a global pandemic that isolated our children, deepening poverty, hunger, and with a continuing drug crisis, our kids are simply not okay. I want to share a few quick stories from my district as to show the true benefit to social and emotional health that this bill will bring to Berry City. In our school district alone in this school year, we've seen a student with multiple hospital visits for alcohol toxicity, which is defined as a blood alcohol content over 3.0, nearly dead, with use of other drugs and risky behaviors, including jumping out of a moving car and a coordinated services plan for eventual residential placement, but wait lists remain long. An additional student asking if they would be suspended if they fatally injured another student. Their father was released from jail 1 year ago for manslaughter and drug distribution. Now, that student and their siblings have been left with their father while the mother attends rehab. And third, a student, like so many others, arriving at school from a very difficult home situation that needs extensive therapy and mental health supports as a result of ongoing childhood trauma. However, this student does not qualify under special education, so our options and the resources that we have to offer support are extremely limited. This student cannot process minor struggles or disappointments. They lack the social skills to make friends or real connections, which leads to escalated behaviors and putting students and staff at risk. Our staff has made reports to DCF with little to no follow-through. The child has asked for help, but knowing that most wait lists are full, and given our strained budget, we are very limited in what we can do. The family and the student are disappointed, discouraged. The classroom teacher is burnt out with not being able to help or teach this child. This was my reality, and this is our reality in Berry City, and it cannot be allowed to continue. These are kids who are doing their best just to survive day to day. And just like me, they are not getting the supports and the tools that they need through no fault of our own. Despite the extraordinary amount of money that we are currently spending on education, our children's needs are not being met. When we in Berry are grossly understaffed, when it took us 4 attempts to pass a bare bones budget in 2023, this is a status quo that as a representative of Berry City, I will not accept to continue. I do not accept that we cannot do better for our kids. I believe that a child with unmet needs, a child that is suffering, a child that is hungry, those are policy decisions. And H454 makes a policy decision. The policy decision to invest in and support our children. This bill will bring more resources to our schools. This bill will continue to ensure that no child has to ever learn what hunger feels like in school. This bill will help us get our kids the supports and the help they need. This bill will help kids who are doing their best in Berry City to get through a K-12 education. This bill will ensure that fewer children fall through the cracks. Let's stand together today and say that it is never the child's fault, that they deserve everything that we can give them, and that today we're choosing our children. I gratefully and frankly very emotionally ask for your support on behalf of every child in Berry City for whom school is their only safe place. I ask this body to vote yes for all of the teachers like Kathleen McKenzie and for all of the children whose stories you've heard today. They are worth every dollar.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Starksboro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to express my concerns about the class size provisions of this bill, especially as they may negatively impact community elementary schools for reasons other than educational quality. These provisions need additional work before the end of this session. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Westminster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Sorry, I need 1 second. I appreciate the hard work of my colleagues on this bill to transform our education system. There are parts that I like, but I come from a rural community that will be harmed by parts of this legislation if it moves forward in its current form. I was contacted by the chairs of 2 school boards and the superintendent in my town of Westminster, and all urged me to vote against it. I also heard from teachers and parents in my rural district, and all but one from my district who contacted me wanted me to vote no. I have a few problems with H454. The loss of local control in rural areas would be difficult, resulting in school closures and a loss of civic engagement in giant districts of 4,000 students, which will push together a range of communities with different needs. The class size minimums, while appropriate in some settings, are also not suitable for all, especially in rural areas and schools serving high numbers of students with special needs. Not only small rural public schools would be lost with this plan, but also independent schools that provide vital options for some Vermont students will close under this policy. My town of Westminster has both a small public high school and an independent school which serves 7th to 12th grade students. Both schools meet the needs of students and families in my district. The independent school also serves students from many other Vermont communities, a number of whom are neurodiverse students, students living in poverty, students from the LGBTQ community, many of whom experienced bullying in their previous public schools, but who found support and acceptance in the intentionally smaller, intimate, independent school setting. Bigger doesn't necessarily mean better or less expensive when talking about class size or schools. H454 is not likely to reduce costs significantly, but the cost to our rural communities will be significant. Setting the stage to close small rural community schools while not addressing the main cost drivers in education spending, teacher health insurance costs and student mental health costs, to me is prioritizing the wrong issues. A rural community with no local school and long bus rides for children is not a good option for families. This bill will damage some of our already struggling rural communities, including mine. As a teacher, a grandparent, and a representative in a rural district who has heard an outpouring of requests to vote no to preserve our local options, I cannot support this bill that would serve some communities well, but would cause harm for many families and children in rural areas.
Member from Franklin. Member from Franklin.
Excuse me, Madam Speaker, I seem to be standing up at the wrong time and not at the right time. You know, I've heard a lot of things so far today that I can relate to. Coming from Franklin County, I grew up a product of small schools, and things are a lot different now than what they used to be. Instead of 5 cars in a parking lot, there's 50. And so, but I'm not going to talk about emotional things. I want to just talk about some specifics. As you may recall, from the last, when we had the caucus of the whole, I questioned the chair of Ways and Means about how the base and the early language learner values that were both $15,000 and $30 were derived. I want to thank the chair for helping me by sending me links and documents over the weekend and this week. I did also email the UVM consultant that authored some of the materials I received. I'm not pleased to have to report that I am not closer to an answer than I was before. Given the evidence that I've seen, for example, base and early language learner values are precisely the same, $15,000 and $15,030, which seems to me, if this was a calculation, would be improbable because the metrics wouldn't necessarily be the same. And I asked about linear regression, which was mentioned, and I did find a couple of regressions and plots in one of those documents. They did not provide a formula for the line that was calculated, but they did provide R-square values, which I'd asked about, and both of those were less than 0.5. 0 is random. 1 would have every point on that line. So this is not a very good relationship. And so I don't know how that was going to be used or was used in any calculations. So these things just caused red flags to pop up in my mind. So rather than getting into all the statistics and everything, I just had a bad feeling. So they made me suspicious. And when we looked, so I sort of got the impression that they might have been backed into using current spending numbers. And so I say, like the folks out in Ohio, show me. We hear the term evidence-based thrown around in this body to justify all kinds of actions. Science-based work and actions demand objectivity, accuracy, and consistent methods to ensure that regardless of whether we are dealing with water quality issues, mental health issues, school funding, or school outcomes related to funding, that we always have sound data on which we base our decisions. My research over the weekend found that our schools don't even have a standard grading system for the students. We've heard also that all the data isn't shared. We seem to care more about the Brigham decision than we do about student outcomes. One online source characterized the situation in terms of grading in the state of Vermont as a mess. When you start building a house or a program, most people can understand that we need to have a solid foundation rather than building on something that can be characterized as a mess. In my opinion, this bill does little to address my concerns. The proposed committee does not focus on identification of skills needed to solve the problem. It does not spell out the skill-related qualifications for committee members or the range of skills needed to deal with the anticipated tasks at hand. Our current education system feels like an elephant that was designed by a committee. It feels like an elephant is either going to get bigger or we're headed for a time-tested committee process that ends up with a report that gathers dust on its shelf. There's no property relief mentioned in this bill, unless I'm missing something. We already know that we've got $77 million in the FY26 budget to buy down taxes. We've got another $45 million that we believe we may need. And then we've heard that there may be $80 million per year needed going forward until this date when we actually put something into place. So the elephant, it would seem to me, would be keep on growing. Some would say that the proof is in the pudding. If our tax bills are the pudding that most of our taxpayers are going to get to eat, the taste may prove to be a little bit sour. There will be no hiding failure. As a friendly suggestion, a lot of bipartisan work would be a huge step towards in the right direction. And I thank you, Madam Speaker, for entertaining me.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Brattleboro.
Madam Speaker, I agree with the previous speaker that our education system and our education finance system is indeed much like an elephant. And many children's needs are still being met today, and many children's needs are not being met. Many taxpayers' needs are not being met. Many taxpayers' needs are. And so we are engaging in this significant once-in-a-generation reform effort, which includes significant property tax relief for the majority of Vermonters in the section of the bill referring to the change to the homestead exemption, as well as other sections of the bill that deal with cost drivers and the bending of the cost curve implicit in the foundation formula. Madam Speaker, I took a number of doctoral level classes in statistics, most of them actually focused on education research, and I've spent some degree of my career looking at student outcomes related to factors outside of schools' control, such as economic circumstance. And yet I am very, very far from an expert on these issues. But what I do know is that using standardized test scores, such as NEEP and others, is 100% standard practice across the board for measuring student outcomes and the relationship between spending, student circumstance, et cetera. Always student outcomes, that is standard practice for all academics in this field. The folks that we worked with on both the pupil weighting factors report that was delivered to the Agency of Education, I think a decade ago, and the updates that we see in this bill was drafted by two of the national leaders in this work. And we are lucky that they consider Vermont, some as home and some with just a great degree of affection because I believe they grew up here, and so have been able to give us so much attention here in Vermont. They teach education finance for a living. They've been doing this work for decades all over the country. And I have read thoroughly the pupil weighting factors report numerous times, had the opportunity, thanks to previous speaker, to chair a summer committee on the pupil weighting factors report that met very regularly. And I would say still with all of that, Madam Speaker, I do not consider myself an expert on this, but I have dug in deep enough to have a lot of faith in the numbers here, to understand that that we are looking at costs with significance, and that the work that we are drawing on in making sure that all children in this state will have an equal opportunity under the law and under our finance system has a great deal of integrity as we move forward. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Stowe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I'm going to try to keep my remarks brief. I want to thank the members from, first of all, I'd like to thank the committees for their hard work, but the member from Tunbridge and the member from Westminster, I would like to, I won't repeat their thinking. I am a product from a two-room school up. I live in a town that's a factor of 6 times larger than any of the other rural towns I've lived in my life. But as I've said before, I always put my conscience and my constituents first when it comes to voting. And in the last 24 or 36 hours, I've received 100 emails and many phone calls that were, I would say, 100% not in favor of supporting this bill. But to be brief, there are 3 points that I think drove many of the negative comments I got from constituents, and they all were very concerned about outcomes of student performance and opportunity. But I'll break them down into 3 points. The voters of Vermont asked for significant tax reform. They have not asked for a complete upheaval of our district governance system. District consolidation has not proven an effective strategy for saving money. To the contrary, it can often raise taxes and have a very impactful, be very impactful on students, not in a positive way, and communities. And finally, the tax impact proposed formula cannot be determined with the information available. The fiscal note attached essentially on every item reads, quote, "The financial impact is unclear at this time." Therefore, I stand and will be voting no.
Member from Woodstock.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've had an opportunity to have conversations with a number of representatives that there was just some confusion over a particular section of the bill, and I just wanted to provide a little insight. And that is sections 57, 58, and 59. And this has to deal with the future review of the foundation formula. And it's a little confusing when you see the weights go down to 0 or 1. So the reason why I want to make sure, and this is also in the fiscal note prepared by the very talented Joint Fiscal Office. I may have said that before. And it is on page 12 of the Joint Fiscal Note. And Madam Speaker, what this particular part is dealing with is if we decide, and it's an item I under C, as to whether to transition from a cost-based foundation formula to an evidence-based foundation formula, then essentially in sections 58 and 59, it reduces the base amount to $10,000 and the weights to 1. This is a placeholder, Madam Speaker, that if we do decide to move to that formula, then we have to figure out, to an evidence-based formula, we have to readjust what the base is and what those weights are. It is not saying we will, it is saying that we may, or we'll have to evaluate those rules then. And it is contingent in the effective dates that those sections would only become effective upon the development and review of an evidence-based foundation formula by professional judgment panels, compliance by 90% of Vermont classes with class size minimum standards set in the education quality standards, and compliance by 90% of Vermont school buildings with school size standards and the education quality standards, and implementation of a multi-tiered system of supports in each classroom in each Vermont school. So a lot has to happen before we move to that. We have time to reevaluate as to what that base looks like and what those weights look like. I just want to make sure people understand that that's not saying we're automatically going to that. It's saying if these conditions are met, then we could consider going to an evidence-based formula and reapply the weights. Hope that helps. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from St. Albans City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Vermonters demand education reforms that address our affordability crisis and provide better opportunities for our children. I appreciate the time and effort exerted by various parties to get H54 to the floor. However, it fails on both fronts. It is incumbent on this body to recognize the crisis that is how we currently deliver education. We need to address it deliberately and expeditiously. This bill does contain elements that hint at and even acknowledge the crux of the matter, but it offers inadequate solutions. I'll be voting no.
Member from Waitsfield.
Madam Speaker, I stand in support of H454. I'm not a member of the committees on education or on Ways and Means, but I have witnessed the chairs and members of both committees make themselves available to other members of all political persuasions on a regular basis to share their progress on this bill, to accept input from members representing many different school communities, both rural and urban, and to solicit our concerns and ideas. The committees also partnered with members of Vermont's education community who best understand the complexities of our current system, who know change is necessary, and who are committed to the success of every Vermont student. The committees have conducted the most collaborative process I have witnessed in my short time here in the State House. They dove into the governor's education transformation proposal with open minds, focusing on the good ideas and digging into the details to lay out a realistic timeline for change. Like many of my colleagues, I tend to look at things through an affordability lens. And this bill thoughtfully lays out a plan to bring Vermont's education costs under control. This is phase one of that work, and there will be more decisions to be made next year and the next. I strongly believe H454 is on the right track, and I will vote in support of this bill. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Norwich.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I've thought long and hard about what to say here, and I'm going to go off message a little bit. About 100 years ago, when I was a principal in a small rural school, long time ago, we were struggling, and the districts next to my districts were struggling as well. One of the schools had 100% turnover almost every year in its faculty. Another one was close on that. Performance was through the floor, and they were really struggling to serve their kids. And we decided to look at whether we could partner across all these districts in a way that would leave us all better off. And we began to meet. We met as communities. We talked about what we wanted for our children. And we realized that we actually didn't differ as much as we thought we did. And we actually cared about all the same things. And we ended up talking about how to work together to create better opportunities. And we couldn't figure out how to do it without some construction aid. And at one of the meetings where we were talking about how to put together a brand new school for the two most disadvantaged communities, the chair of one of the school boards stood up and said, giving these kids a new school is like dressing up a tramp in a top hat. That's actually why we built the new district, because these are all of our children. And right now, we are not serving all of our children. We're not serving all of them in some of our big schools. Barry is struggling. We're also not serving them well in some of our small schools. And we can't look away right now. We're spending a lot, and we're not giving our children what we need. A lot of that accountability language that's making people uncomfortable, it's been in our statute for years. And when I went to a very small high school a couple years ago, won't identify who or where, I asked the principal, what's the one reason we should keep this school open? And the principal said, because our kids wouldn't make it anywhere else. That's not a reason to keep a school open. And if that's where we are failing our children because they have one shot at school and we have to do better. I've spent a lot of time doing research in education too. I have a doctorate, spent way too many times working with large data sets. The two most consistent predictors of how well children will do in school are the mother's level of education and the family's household income. We're trying to turn that around. We're trying to put in place a funding formula that makes sure we're putting the resources of the state behind every child so that every child can do well and not just the ones who are lucky enough to have a parent who has a great job, a good degree from a great college, and can afford to give them all the benefits and opportunities. These are all our children, and we are not meeting their needs now, and we can do better. Doing nothing is creating a problem. Small schools are already closing. As the member from Newfane noted yesterday, 3 small public schools have already closed in her region, and her small rural high school's fate is precarious. And this is happening even as students are taking tuition dollars out of state to elite prep schools where parents have to pay far beyond what we are willing to pay. That's not fair, and it's taking dollars out that could help that school do better. Just this week, we heard of 2 additional closures, and these closures are the result of attrition, and they aren't happening evenly across the state. They're tending to happen in more rural communities, and they're happening in less wealthy communities. Not all small schools are the same. Some can be robust because their communities have the resources, some can't, and those are the ones we need to worry about. Kids need access to good schools, and we can't leave them in schools that are dwindling and succumbing to higher costs, in schools that can't meet their needs. This is not good for kids, and it's not good for our communities. Doing nothing means death by attrition for many of these programs. We also need to get serious here because our costs are high. I hear about affordability more than anything else I hear about. But in our healthcare markets, our average marketplace healthcare premium is 4 times those in neighboring New Hampshire, and it's going up. Regarding federal funds, we're amongst the states that is most dependent on federal funds. Used to be that our school budget's about 15% of what they spent was healthcare. Now we're closing in on 20%. There's nothing they can do about it. That means healthcare is competing with school. We are just beginning to experience the disruption. I talked to a superintendent who, when they ceased the ARP-ESSER monies, was left holding the bag for $500,000 that they'd spent in anticipation of reimbursement, which they're now getting. They're going to have to deal with that in the next budget cycle. Together, we as a body and as a state are going to be coping with significant system shocks over the next coming years. We're going to be doing that over and over. Now is the time to start building stability and resilience in that system. That's what we're trying to do here. I got issues too. We all have concerns about this bill. We know it can feel hard. We know it makes our communities and people feel scared and vulnerable. But we can't pretend that this disruption is not happening because pretending would be far worse. As a state, we have to work together to protect our people and protect what we care about. I appreciate the concern, and I'm going to say, like my colleague from North Bennington, I know that we have time to keep working, but I know if we don't go forward, we won't keep working. I'm going to not sit here and argue for what my individual community wants. I'm going to ask all of you to step up and lean into working together and pushing through our fears and through our challenges because our communities and our schools need us to do that now. We're here because of problems that we've ignored for years, and now is the time. We have to do this. Democracy is messy. It is hard. It is brutal. If you're getting the email I'm getting, you know that too. How to work together to take care of our kids has always been messy and hard. That's why people in public schools avoid politics as much as they can, because they take care of all of our kids, not just some of our kids. We need to do that too. We have to work together to take care of our kids. We have to understand that our differences aren't going to fall on partisan lines here, and they never have in public education. And let's repeat that. This is all of our jobs.
We all have concerns, and we're going to stay at the table because that's what our communities need. Earlier in the session, someone on the governor's team said in our committee that this is a unique opportunity to build from scratch. But when we do this work, we are never, ever starting from scratch. We are always building on our past. We are building on the relationships that our communities already have. We're talking about real kids in real schools, in real communities. We're talking about educators who worked their hearts out through Act 46 when the whole world felt like it was disrupted. And then they did it again through a global pandemic. We're talking about school boards who've been battling these double-digit increases in healthcare costs every year and trying to fill huge gaps in our state social service networks, services that are keeping some of our kids alive. We're talking about special educators who desperately need state-level leadership and capacity, and this bill gives that on special education to be able to improve learning, and yes, to my colleague in Franklin, to bring down that cost, because we know we identify more kids and we spend more per kid on special education than most other states. But that's a delivery and oversight issue, and we need the agency to have the staff and the capacity to step up and lead, because that's how we're going to get better outcomes for kids and bring down the cost and strengthen our communities at the same time. Our constituents know that we're talking about kids who depend on school to provide stability and opportunity in their lives, as my colleague from Barrie said, that leave them feeling overrun by chaos and challenge. But that's our community. Those are our leaders of tomorrow. And when we push in that help right now, and when we protect the reality that people, even in rural communities, yes, they do need access to schools and safety nets. When we pay attention and we take this slowly and do it right, we are protecting the bright future of our state. Our constituents want to know that when they pay their taxes, we're going to use every dollar as carefully and efficiently as possible to help our kids learn. We need to be talking about education, about how we improve teaching, and we can't do it until our schools have the kind of stability that a foundation formula can give them. In our rural communities, they cherish the way schools bring people together and give them a sense of community. That's something we all fear losing, but we also know right now it is fraying. This bill is an effort to make sure our schools can continue to play that role, despite the fact that we have to wrestle with real challenges around cost and around equity of opportunity. All of this, make no mistake, while Vermont's population and our school population is still shrinking. I know this is a hard vote for many. I'm urging us to see this as a stop on the way. I'm urging us to avoid the temptation to dig in, avoid the temptation to stop and fight and be narrow. And instead, let's lean in and break bread and work together to shared solutions. This policy needs more work, as everything does mid-session. Over the last day, I've gotten those emails too. But we can do this. There's still things we will do and that only we or the administration can do, all of which can permanently increase stability and bring down costs. I'm going to work like heck between now and the end of the session, as I hope all of you will, because our children need us to do this. I watched a lot of House Ed footage, and one of the things, if you have not done it, Madam Speaker, I hope you will take the time to look at the educators in that committee from both parties. They had a real impact on me, because what they did is they kept bringing this conversation back to the children. Is this going to be better for the children? Let's take our cue from them. That's what we need to focus on. I'm voting for this bill not because I think it's perfect, but because in this unprecedented moment, we cannot choose to do nothing. I'm voting for this bill not because I expect it to look the same in a week or in 2 weeks, because we're all working hard, but because we have to keep this conversation going. I'm voting for it because none of us is going to look the same in 4 years, but we need to be wrapping our arms around each other and around our most vulnerable children to make sure that they stay safe and that we come out of this stronger and better in the future. I'm voting for this bill because right now a no vote stops that conversation. I'm voting to stop talking and keep listening to other people as well. Our current funding formula is inflationary and poorly targeted. Make no mistake, if we keep going the way we are, we will see higher cost and more disparity. places like Barry and Slate Valley. Again, this is not partisan. As my former school board chair and former Orange County Republican senator once said, all of these children are our Vermont children, and I have tried to help that and hold that in my heart my entire career. What this foundation plan will do is make sure that we share the wealth and the opportunity of a state in the way that makes sure every Vermont child has the opportunity that they deserve and has a fair chance to be like some of the legislators who are sitting here today. I'm holding those kids in my heart right now. This bill isn't done, but I have faith in you and all of our colleagues in the State House today, and I have faith in our children. I have faith that we can keep this conversation going, and I have faith that we will end this session with a bill that makes our schools better and our kids and our communities stronger. I'm voting yes because democracy is messy, and we need to show our communities how we persevere through these hard conversations so they can do that back home. I'm voting yes because even though it's painful, we owe it to our children and we owe it to our future as a state to keep trying. If you want this conversation to continue, whether you are struggling with this bill or not, I ask you please to vote with me. Then join me and work with me and work with your colleagues here in the State House to make this bill better in the next coming months, so that when we come back in May with this bill, after it comes back from the Senate, we can put our weight behind it. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Dorset.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am concerned that our independent schools are not given enough consideration in H 454. In many parts of our state, independent schools are not an optional luxury. Schools like my alma mater, Burton, accept all students in our area. In essence, it is our public high school. Others, like St. Johnsbury Academy, Linden Institute, and Long Trail School, are in the same boat. For that reason, as well as the increased expense, and once again, kicking the can down the road, I will be voting no. I do remain hopeful that working together and protecting our independent schools, we can craft an education reform bill that the House, Senate, and our governor will support. Thank you.
Member from Montpelier. Member from South Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a new member, the work on education transformation has been a lot to take on. This is big, ambitious, important work. It has many moving pieces and many separate learning curves for a new member to climb. You have to understand education policy well enough to understand how different funding systems might impact it. You have to learn how reappraisals and ongoing maintenance impact the quality of our statewide grant list. You have to learn how different levers in tax policy affect different types of taxpayers, how they might impact the revenues of the state, and what effect they might have on how property and businesses are developed. The list goes on, but I am grateful to have the opportunity to do this work in this moment with the people I get to do it with. I continue to learn so much from my fellow committee members who each bring different experiences and knowledge about each of the aspects of this transformation work. As a former school board chair for one of the larger districts in the state, I have seen the need for this work for years. Increasing student needs for things like special education services and the underfunding of our social service agencies and community supports have meant that we've asked our dedicated teachers, staff, and schools to take on more and more of the burden of addressing the consequences of our state's broader challenges. Issues like the opioid crisis, the pandemic, a lack of community mental health services, and our lack of affordable housing are reflected in our children, who come to school needing more support for their basic needs, a feeling of safety, food, time to develop social emotional skills, just so they can be ready to learn. Meeting these needs in our current structure has meant hiring more staff, leading to one of the lowest student staff ratios in the country and driving up costs. At the same time, school districts are faced with rising costs such as annual double-digit percentage increases in employee health insurance premiums that are outside of their control. The cost of maintaining one of the oldest portfolios of school buildings in the country, one which was sized to house 50% more students than our current system serves today, grows each year. Our current funding system has meant that property taxpayers are feeling overburdened. As the member from Brattleboro described yesterday, different communities' ability and willingness to pay higher and higher property taxes has meant that funding for our schools is almost as unequal from district to district as it was before the Brigham decision 30 years ago. The unpredictability of tax rates and complexity of our tax credit system make it difficult for households to create and manage their budgets. Our schools are forced to make painful cuts to student-facing programming each year. Our funding system is fragile, and we need to fix it. As a finance professional, I dove into this work head-on even before the session began. I started watching meetings of the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont back when they started in the summer to try to understand the different perspectives on education transformation and funding. I put the time in to dive deep into the spreadsheets and reports provided by the consultants involved with both the administration's proposal and the one outlined in H454 today. I read and asked questions about the detailed analysis provided by our diligent team at the JFO. I spent hours on the phone with Dr. Tammy Colby, who developed the foundation formula proposed in H454, and reread her previous pupil weighting study from 2019, which was updated and adapted for this work. The work is far from over. Making large changes without careful planning and consideration of the details risks breaking our system and hurting our children and our communities. But H454 helps us take a large step forward and sets the stage for our future work. After putting in the time to learn as much as I can about our school funding system and doing my own small part to help shape the proposal on the table, I am confident that H454 as presented to us today provides the right framework for transitioning our education governance, quality standards, and funding models to a system that is more stable, sustainable, equitable, and over the long term, more affordable. And so I hope you will join me in voting yes for our kids, our schools, and our communities. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, we've been conducting a very long debate about public education, which is the bedrock of a healthy democracy. And we've heard a lot of members review the cost versus benefits of our education system. And we've heard a lot of members talk about how education reform is being driven by an affordability crisis. I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that the cost of doing business, including the business of our schools, is being driven mostly by national and international factors out of our control. And our own state economist a few years ago said that our economy was like a cork in the ocean. And right now I feel like we're trying to keep a ship afloat while it's being torpedoed from every direction, including from our president and our governor, who've clearly made themselves known as enemies of public education. And I feel like King Solomon right now being asked to make a judgment about which woman gets a baby. And I'm being asked, and that, like King Solomon, I'm choosing to cut the baby in half. And this does not feel like a good decision. And I'm not sure which vote is the vote that would keep the baby whole. I want to acknowledge the impact of this debate on our children, on their families, and on our school staff who are bearing this at a very difficult time, at a time when children are being snatched from in front of our schools by ICE. However we move forward to sustain the human right of education, I want us to just remember the children and families. And during this debate, sometimes I will talk with other staff in the building who aren't involved to process it, because it's good to get the perspective of those who aren't legislators. And a food service worker said to me, "Brian, what do kids really need?" And I said, "Love." And he said, "That's right, don't forget that." And so I wanted to share that with you all, that let's remember that no matter how much we vote today, that what kids need right now more than anything is love. And whatever decision we make, we can do it with love. And it's in the spirit of that love that I ask that the vote be taken by roll, so that all members' voices are captured by the record, that none of us are right or wrong, and that we just move forward with love. Thank you.
The member from Burlington requests that when the vote is taken, it be taken by roll. Is the member sustained? The member is sustained. When the vote is taken, it will be taken by roll. The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Milton.
Madam Speaker, we had a path forward with the governor's proposal. Unfortunately, there wasn't the effort or desire to work within the parameters of the original H454 to collaborate and compromise. Instead, we have a bill in front of us that pushes stabilization of the education system and enhanced student opportunities further off than necessary. On top of that, we see the addition of initiatives that are not needed, making an already difficult bill even harder to support. If we were truly interested in transforming Vermont's education system, we would be debating a clean bill that includes only the changes necessary to move us forward. This bill fails to provide the timeline Vermonters need and the changes Vermont students deserve. Although I do not support this bill as written, I'm hopeful that in its journey that the Vermont legislature passes an education bill with strong bipartisan support that benefits all of our students.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Dover.
Madam Speaker, I feel very passionately about our public education system. Have since I got to this building. One of the reasons that I got to this building, I came of age here in Vermont slightly after graduating from a small rural high school during Act 60. Massive financing overhaul in our education system, which was incredibly disruptive. And had some tweaks that we did to it, and was pretty hard, as it turns out, on rural Vermont, and was hard for a long time and harmed kids for a long time. We've done a little bit of work to fix that. Before I got here, in my rural, isolated part of the state, my colleagues worked really hard to bring rural communities together. And it took years and years to get a proposal that voters were willing to accept. And then in this building, we pulled the rug out from underneath them with state aid for school construction. And so that was dramatically scaled back. And then they were hit with disaster in Tropical Storm Irene. I came into this building determined. At the time, we were talking about consolidation. I came in with the member from Newfane, and I was determined to stop Act 46, stop consolidation. And in the end, I ended up voting for it because it became clear to me that we could not continue in the manner that we had been going. That our rural schools and rural communities were becoming so vulnerable that we needed each other. Act 46, an imperfect bill in so many ways, asked us to look at how we could work together to do better for our kids. It relied on local control, and it would have benefited from sustained technical support and programmatic support at the state level, which ultimately dried up and went away. Had that continued, I think perhaps we would not be in the situation that we're in right now. I've been in this building, as many of you know. Madam Speaker, as you know, we've had some epic sessions on the financing formula and pupil weights. And that was really important. Probably too late, really, at that point. So much harm had been done. Not really able to fix our system. We're looking at massive demographic change, housing shortage. So many of my colleagues today have talked about healthcare and the effect that that is having on our budgets. And, I'm getting done this year after 20 years on my school board. I know the folks on the ground, I know that they are doing the very, very best that they can for their students. And that ability, the capacity is not the same everywhere throughout our state. I think it was really clear this year from voters that the property tax situation where we have landed, which is driven by so many factors, including such diminished support for so long from the state. A number of, great ideas we have to push down that cause pain and are not supported. COVID, as I've already mentioned, demographics, et cetera. We're in big trouble. In my district, we're trying to rectify a budget. We've got 108 kids in 2 buildings that, a district that merged after Act 46. We're spending $500,000 this year on administration. And just down the road from us, we can see our local high school is almost, it's on life support, and it's surrounded by school choice towns. And if that high school closes, there are kids that, in order to get to a public high school, maybe on the bus for 45 minutes to an hour on roads that regularly close during the wintertime. So I really feel it in terms of what's happening in rural Vermont around education. And I've been deeply disappointed in work that has happened in this body and by the administration, or a lack of work or a lack of accountability. And I want to say, I find myself in a very strange place, Madam Speaker. I went to town meeting this year, big topic, of course, and my folks said to me at that point, we just had the governor's proposal. We may have had his bill, which certainly was missing a lot of detail. And my constituents asked me, what do you think of it? And I said, well, I think it's the appropriate scale and the appropriate scope. There's a lot to be worked out, but we're in trouble. We can't keep going this way. And I still feel that way. It's the appropriate scale. And I thank the governor for really setting a vision that was so bold and so big. And I look at this bill, I can't believe it. I've said to the member from Brattleboro several times, I think you might have done a good job here. And, I'm fairly skeptical about our ability to produce good education legislation. I look at this timeline that you emailed to us. I think it was on March 31st. And it gives me a lot of comfort, and it gives me the ability to say to my communities, we have to think big, but we've been given a timeline that allows us to do that together, where we can all participate in a way that is transformative, and that if we find things that are not working, if we find that the class size minimums, for instance, are just not going to work in certain parts of the state, or that the policy that we've put in place here around independent schools, or that transportation, if we find that those things are not right, we've built enough space here to deal with that. It's a pretty aggressive timeline for the type of transformation that we're talking about, but it allows us to come back year over year and really think about the work and talk about the work that is being done. My husband is a pretty big accelerator on my concerns around affordability, as the person who is examining our property tax bill and is not especially happy with what is happening to it. But as I explained to him, there's not much, there's a lot that can happen at the local level, but at the state level, really, there's very little that we can do at this point except just kind of push down some pain. There's nothing we can do that's really well-informed in terms of cost containment. And this proposal gets us to a place where we can be better informed, and we can be more certain that when we're pushing down cost containment, we aren't just harming rural and small schools or poor schools, which is something that we did for decades. And so, Madam Speaker, I thank you, and I thank the Committee on Ways and Means and the Committee on Education. I am really impressed. I know there's a lot to be scared of here, and I want to assure all the new members, this is what big education policy in the State House always looks like. And, the aspirations for, this to be a unanimous bill or even, it's always going to be close. Education is really deeply personal, but I think you've done a good job. And I hope there are not a lot of Easter eggs in here, member from Brattleboro, and I look forward to supporting this.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, we all know the problems. Property taxes are too high. The weight of property taxes lands too unfairly across Vermont. Per pupil spending is too high. Our student population has declined by 40,000 in the last 40 years. Our average school size is 400. The loss of 40,000 students is the equivalent of 100 Vermont schools now standing empty. Those are the problems that we have to address. This bill cannot address everything. We have heard concerns that it doesn't address how many districts we'll have. It does not spell out the effects on transportation. It does not address healthcare costs. It doesn't tell us which schools are going to close. But Madam Speaker, I would say those open questions are the strength of this bill. It does not pretend to have answers it does not have. It does not ignore the problems. It puts us on a path to come to the best possible answer we can in terms of the number of school districts. When we know that, it puts us on a path to get to the best answer we can in terms of transportation. It is my hope we will also work on the underlying cost drivers like healthcare in parallel. Madam Speaker, the governor's plan had a lot of ideas in it, but the two big ones were the foundation formula and a transformational reduction in the number of school districts, and this bill puts us on the path to achieve both of those goals as well. I will be voting yes, and I hope we as a body also vote yes.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? Member from St. Albans Town.
Madam Speaker, I first want to thank the members of the House Committee on Education for all the thoughtful discussions and work we have done over the past 13 plus weeks. I am truly and honestly appreciative that my amendment today was considered and supported. I was really hopeful that we could have reached an agreement on a complete educational reform bill that I could have voted for. Unfortunately, at this point, I will be voting no. We tried to get more language from the governor's original proposal to be included in the bill, but that seemed to be denied at every turn, and instead only bits and pieces of the plan were used. As an analogy, you cannot walk into a grocery store with a recipe to bake a cake and only pick a few ingredients. You set yourself up for failure, and failure is the last thing that we want. Vermonters are taxed out. Last year, the property tax increases really forced us to put a focus on education reform, but the direction of this bill doesn't solve the underlying problems of overspending. All I see in this bill is an attempt to shift the cost with a new tax structure and new classifications for taxation. I want to be clear that our focus should be solely on improving student outcomes and giving relief to our constituents. Currently, we spend $2.5 billion to educate 84,000 students. That makes us the highest per pupil spending state in the country, and this bill, as written, shows that we will actually spend more. We can do better. In the governor's proposal, we will be buying down property taxes at a cost of $77 million. This is to give our constituents a break on another 6% increase in property taxes while we plan to fix the system. The problem with this bill is we're putting off doing the hard work for now, allowing someone else to do our job. How much longer can we wait? How much longer can the system survive? If nothing changes, the only option districts have is to continue cutting while costs continue to go up. I believe it's time we show leadership and put our kids first. We had a plan to save money, provide better support for our schools, but most importantly, we have a chance to give our students better opportunities. I am hopeful though, that by the time we adjourn this year, we will have a plan that closer resembles H454 as introduced, and my children will be afforded better opportunities while saving our constituents money. I really trust our process, and I believe we can get there because, Madam Speaker, if there's a will, there is a way. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Member from Essex Junction.
Madam Speaker, Vermont's current education structure, while rooted in local tradition, is showing signs of strain. Declining enrollment, rising costs, aging facilities, and governance complexity all signal the need for a careful but resolute transformation. H54 provides that path, one that is intentional, incremental, and guided by deep public engagement. Vermonters across the state deserve a public education system that is equitable, modern, and sustainably funded. 454 takes significant steps in that direction. I appreciate the thoughtful and intentional approach the committees of jurisdiction took to develop this comprehensive bill and look forward to seeing it move forward. I ask my colleagues to join me in voting yes on H454.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, will the clerk please call the roll?
Arsenault of Williston.
2 minutes.
Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? I would like to remind members that we are in the middle of a roll call vote. Members and guests are prohibited from using computers, phones, or any type of electronic device. Please refrain from the passing of notes and conversation during a roll call. When the clerk calls your name, please answer in a loud and clear voice so the clerk can accurately record your votes. The question is, shall the bill pass? The clerk may continue to call the roll.
Austin of Colchester. Bailey of Hyde Park.
No.
Bartholomew of Heartland.
Yes.
Bartley of Fairfax.
No explanation.
Berbecco of Winooski.
Yes.
Byrong of Vergennes.
Yes.
Bishop of Colchester.
Yes.
Black of Essex.
Yes.
Bloomley of Burlington.
Yes.
Boslin of Westminster.
No.
Bosch of Clarendon.
No.
Booton of Berry City.
Yes, with explanation.
Boyden of Cambridge. Brady of Williston.
Yes.
Brannigan of Georgia. Brown of Richmond.
Yes, with explanation.
Burdett of West Rutland.
Yes, with explanation.
Burke of Brattleboro.
Yes.
Burkhart of South Burlington.
Yes.
Burrows of West Windsor.
Yes.
Burt of Cabot. Campbell of St. Johnsbury.
Yes.
Canfield of Fairhaven.
No.
Caris Duncan of Whitingham.
Yes.
Casey of Montpelier.
Yes.
Casey of Hubbardton.
No.
Chapin of East Montpelier.
Yes.
Charlton of Chester. Christie of Hartford. Chena of Burlington.
Yes.
Coffin of Cavendish.
No.
Cole of Hartford. Conlon of Cornwall.
Yes.
Cooper of Pownell.
Yes. Explanation.
Corcoran of Bennington.
Yes.
Cordis of Bristol.
Yes.
Critchlow of Colchester.
Yes.
DeMar of Enosburg.
No.
Dickinson of St. Albans Town. Dobrovich of Williamstown. Dodge of Essex. Dolan of Essex Junction.
Yes.
Dolgan of St. Johnsbury. Donahghue of Northfield.
No.
Duke of Burlington.
Yes.
Durfee of Shaftesbury. Eastis of Guilford.
Yes.
Emmons of Springfield.
Yes.
Feltus of Linden.
No.
Galfetti of Berrytown.
Yes.
Garifano of Essex. Goulburn of Rockingham.
Yes.
Goodnow of Brattleboro.
Yes.
Ghostland of Northfield.
No.
Granning of Jericho.
Yes, with explanation.
Greer of Bennington.
Yes.
Gregoire of Fairfield.
Yes, with explanation.
Hango of Berkshire.
No.
Harple of Glover.
No.
Harrison of Chittenden.
Oh, no.
Harvey of Castleton.
No.
Hedrick of Burlington.
Yes.
Higley of Lowell.
Yes, with explanation.
Holcomb of Norwich. Hooper of Randolph.
No.
Hooper of Burlington.
Yes.
Houghton of Essex Junction.
Yes.
Howard of Rutland City.
Yes.
Howland of Rutland Town. Hunter of Manchester. James of Manchester.
No.
Kosenska of Burke. Keyser of Rutland City.
Yes.
Kimball of Woodstock.
Yes.
Klepner of Burlington.
Yes.
Kornheiser of Brattleboro. Krasnow of South Burlington. Krowinski of Burlington.
Yes.
Labor of Morgan.
No.
Lally of Shelburne.
Yes.
Lalonde of South Burlington.
Yes.
Lamont of Morristown. LaRush of Franklin. Lipsky of Stowe.
No.
Logan of Burlington.
Yes, with explanation.
Long of Newfane.
Yes.
Luno of St. Albans City.
No.
McGuire of Rutland City. Malay of Pittsford. Marcotte of Coventry.
Yes, with explanation.
Maslin of Thetford. McCann of Montpelier.
Yes.
McCoy of Pulteney.
No.
McFawn of Berrytown.
Yes, with explanation.
McGill of Bridport.
Yes.
Eccles of Milton.
No.
Mahaly of Callis.
Yes.
Minnie of South Burlington.
Yes.
Morgan Ella Milton. Morgan Emma Milton.
No.
Morse of Springfield. Morrissey of Bennington. Morrow of Weston.
No.
Rowicki of Putney.
Yes.
Nelson of Derby.
No.
Nielsen of Brandon.
No.
Niagara of Bennington. North of Ferrisburg. Noyes of Wolcott.
Yes.
Nugent of South Burlington.
Yes.
O'Brien of Tunbridge.
No.
Odie of Burlington.
Yes.
Oliver of Sheldon.
No.
Olson of Starksboro.
Yes, with explanation.
Page of Newport City.
No.
Parsons of Newberry.
No.
Pezzo of Colchester.
Yes.
Pincenot of Georgia. Dorset.
No.
Pouch of Heinsberg.
Yes.
Powers of Waterford. Priestley of Bradford.
Yes.
Pritchett of Pollitt.
No.
Quimby of Linden. Rachelson of Burlington.
Yes.
Sakowitz of Randolph.
Yes.
Shy of Middlebury.
Yes.
Sheldon of Middlebury.
Yes, and I'd like to explain my vote.
Sibilia of Dover.
Yes.
Southworth of Walden.
No.
Squirrel of Underhill. Steady of Milton.
No.
Stevens of Waterbury.
Yes.
Stone of Burlington.
Yes.
Sweeney of Shelburne.
Yes.
Teclavia of Corinth.
No.
Taylor of Milton.
No.
Tomlinson of Winooski.
Yes.
Toof of St. Albans Town.
No.
Torrey Moore Town.
Yes.
Walker of Swanton. Wazza Zachaberry City.
Yes.
Waters Evans of Charlotte.
Yes.
Wells of Brownington. White of Waitsfield.
Yes.
White of Bethel. Winter of Ludlow.
No.
Wood of Waterbury.
Yes.
Yakavonia of Morristown.
Yes.
Christie of Hartford. Cole of Hartford. Dickinson of St. Albans Town. Holland of Rutland Town. McGuire of Rutland City. Morse of Springfield. And Wells of Brownington.
For purpose of explanation, member from Fairfax.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I quote a constituent of mine?
You may.
A constituent asking me to vote no said it best: we can do better, but few can do more. H454 has been touted as a step forward. In reality, it is a baby step. When Vermonters, they need a leap. This bill does not rectify the mistakes of the past. It doesn't address the deep economic injustices that our students have endured for decades, and it certainly does not reflect the urgency of the moment. We were elected in this body, and it is our duty to uphold that responsibility. It is unacceptable to expect another body to correct our mistakes.
Member from Berry City.
I voted yes, but I did so because I want this bill to advance to the Senate, where I hope they will take a more bipartisan approach in drafting a compromise version. I also have to note that the funding model in this bill is favorable to us. That being said, what began as a bold and immediate reform proposal by the governor, one that prioritized student outcomes over political advocacy, has become a lackluster and meandering plan. It will inevitably require us to revisit this third rail in a few years, much like Act 46. I'm deeply disappointed where we have landed, and I hope the Senate can make it better.
Member from Richmond.
Madam Speaker, I voted yes today for a hopeful, sustainable future for all Vermont students. The students in my district now and the students in the small rural Vermont district where I attended public school from kindergarten through high school. I also want to thank all the members of the education field who testified and assisted us with this bill and who supported this bill. We appreciate their commitment to helping us get it right together and for the incredible work that's happening every day in schools across Vermont.
Member from West Rutland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to be crystal clear. Even though I voted yes for H454, I do not support this version of the bill. I'm reaching across the aisle and voting yes to form an alliance to help keep this bill alive, and with it, the hopes of Vermonters. My hope is the Senate comes through with their promise of a bipartisan bill with an affordable education system Vermonters told us they wanted in the 2024 election season. Over the last few years, I've heard a message from the majority party asking, where is your plan? A well-thought-out plan that would have benefited Vermonters was put forth, and the parts that would have given Vermonters the most property tax relief were ignored in this bill.
Member from Pownell.
Madam Speaker, I am voting yes because this bill positions Vermont for a future that is already underway. Our structures are overbuilt. Our educators are overstretched. Our students are under-resourced. This bill acknowledges the spatial and social realities of our state's mountains, valleys, and borders, and provides the common sense need for people to take time to make sound decisions.
Member from Barrytown.
Madam Speaker, it is with great reticence that I am voting yes on this version of the bill. However, if we do not pass this bill out of the House, the opportunity to reform education funding and stabilize property taxes will be lost. It is my hope that the Senate majority will work with their Vermont Republican counterparts to return a bipartisan bill as their leadership has already promised. Phil Scott Republicans are the party of now and compromise, not the party of no.
Member from Jericho.
I vote yes for H 454 because it sets the path to educate all of Vermont's children, providing equal opportunity across the state. This bill also gives Vermont taxpayers needed stability and protections against the fluctuations that come from the inflationary system that we have today.
Member from Bennington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Independent schools are a part of our education framework. They serve our students well and make our community stronger. I vote yes because of the protections we've included to protect our elementary schools across rural Vermont.
Member from Fairfield.
Madam Speaker, I do not vote yes today because this bill represents a good faith effort to work collaboratively or in a bipartisan way toward real and lasting solutions. Collaboration and bipartisan have been used as buzzwords today. I'd urge everyone who use those terms to self-reflect on what they actually mean and what that work actually looks like. This is not that. Instead, I vote yes to move this bill to the Senate, where we have a commitment to actually work collaboratively to get a bill that serves the best interests of Vermonters. Vermonters deserve better, far better. And if we choose to truly work together, we can deliver a bill by the end of the session that everyone can be genuinely proud of, regardless of party or whether we live in urban or rural areas.
Member from Lowell.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I voted yes, only to move this process forward in hopes that the end product will yield more choices and opportunities for our children and create an understandable and stable property tax. Thank you.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, I vote yes on H 454 for all Vermonters and to resist the deceptive rhetoric that haphazard action can deliver the high-quality, affordable public education that we and our children deserve.
Member from Coventry.
Madam Speaker, I reluctantly vote yes. 3 committees, 3 7-4 votes. The passing of the amendment from the member from St. Albans and Essex Junction gives me a glimmer of hope that we can start working in a bipartisan manner. The November election sent us all a clear message from Vermonters. Work together and fix the problem.
Member from Barrytown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I voted yes to keep the prospects of education reform alive. If this was the final bill, I couldn't vote for it. My constituents and Vermonters voted for balance in November. It is my hope that the Senate will return to us a bipartisan bill that most of us can vote for and the governor can sign. That is in the best interest of the children that it will impact.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, today in H 454, we start where we are, not where we wish to be. H 454 moves our education funding system to the future with a more fair, stable, predictable funding model for Vermont schools and Vermont taxpayers, and with a greater chance for equal educational opportunity for Vermont school children.
Member from Starksboro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I voted for H454 because it contains much that I support, including a good start to reforming our education financing system. There remain issues to work on, including a consequential review of education fund spending, including a thoughtful approach to class size, and including the establishment on a permanent basis of fair standards, a fair process, and a community voice before a school is closed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Middlebury.
Madam Speaker, public education is the commitment we make to all of our children to give them the opportunity they deserve to become healthy, productive members of society, regardless of who their parents are. High-quality schools allow all students to learn and grow to the best of their abilities, obtaining the skills they need to engage productively in their community, the economy, and our democracy. Today, I vote yes for H454 to give all Vermont students equitable access to the educational opportunity they deserve.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
While I appreciate the work of the Education and Ways and Means Committees and you, Madam Speaker, to get this bill to the floor, I cannot support the bill at this time. I look forward to receiving this bill back from the Senate with language I can support. Vermonters, and especially our children, deserve nothing less.
Member from Dover.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
Madam Speaker, in 2025, I am so grateful to serve in a state legislative body that has worked through such great discomfort to act in a bipartisan manner to advance work on education reform.
Member from Westminster.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I come from a rural community that will lose vital, small, wanted local schools, both public and independent, if this bill moves forward in its current form. School districts of at least 4,000 students will not solve our problems, but will result in a loss of local control and civic engagement, especially in rural communities. I voted no to preserve small local schools in local communities.
Member from Winooski.
Madam Speaker, I'm voting yes for Winooski kids, educators, and families. More than 20 languages are spoken in our school by the only minority-majority student body in the state. Multilingual supports are fundamental to us. And I'm voting yes because my community has immense hope that those supports will be protected in the evolution of this legislation.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, may I explain my vote?
You may.
I'm voting yes on H454 because every child in Vermont deserves the chance to learn, grow, and thrive in a school system that won't let them down. This bill puts students at the heart of our decisions, building a stronger, more stable foundation for their future. It's not just about education, it's about doing right by our kids, our communities, and the Vermont we all believe in.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, may I please explain my vote?
You may.
Madam Speaker, I voted yes because the status quo is unacceptable for our kids, our students, and our communities. I know change is hard, but we must lead and create stability in our public education system. Members, this is our moment. Let's show every kid in our state that no matter where they live, they will have the best education at a price we can afford.
Members, please listen to the results of your vote. Those voting yes, 87. Those voting no, 55. The ayes have it, and you have passed the bill. Would the House please stand at ease?
Come to order. Will the House please come to order? Members, that completes the orders of the day. Are there any announcements? Member from Essex.
To the committee room immediately after the fall of the gavel.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing member from Chittenden.
Madam Speaker, I would just like to point out that it's exactly 11:09 in Alaska. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to adjourn until Tuesday, April 15th at 10 a.m.?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion this body stand in adjournment until Tuesday, April 15th, 2025 at 10 a.m.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and this body stands in adjournment until Tuesday at 10.